Hello, everyone. We have made it. It is our grand finale informational interview for Mental Health Awareness Month. We have had some amazing guests. We've had lots of information, lots of resources, but this one I am super excited about. We have Kym and Mark Hilinski with us. They are from Hilinski's Hope. They were supposed to come and be our keynote speaker for our meet and greet. It was supposed to be on May 21st. With COVID-19, everything was canceled. We were heartbroken. So to have them join us for these interviews and still get their story out, the information out, the resources. And obviously, Light After Loss is a survivor supporting survivor organization. And it was important as our grand finale to have suicide loss survivors share their story and what they're doing now, because that's exactly what Light After Loss is. I've been through my own journey. And on the flip side, kind of giving back and spreading the word, supporting survivors. So their story is super close to my heart. So I will turn it over to Mark and Kym Hilinski. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Shannon. Okay, how you doing?
Yeah. I am good. I am good. It is sunny there?
No.
Cloudy, little rainy, but it's actually pretty. There's a lot of weather here in South Carolina, not used to that being from Southern California.
Yes, and here it's the sun's kind of been popping in and out over the last couple days. Ohio's weather is always unpredictable. It could be snowing 1 second and 90 the next. So you just kind of go with it. Wear all the clothes. Make sure your car has all the clothes because you never know what to prepare for. So talk about, the reason I brought you on today. Talk about being a suicide loss survivor and your story. Just share your story with us.
Well, survivor, that's a difficult word. I maybe that's really the only word. Thriving would not be a word at all. I guess we are surviving since Tyler passed. And when he did pass, it was a surprise to us. It was a surprise to everybody who knew him. We had no idea that he was struggling. And he was such a beautiful, fun, giving, loving person. And we were suffering so bad without him that we realized that if it could happen to Tyler, who was doted on and loved by everybody who knew him, then it can happen to anyone. And we didn't want the world to lose another Tyler, right? Or another family. If we could help them, we want to do that and, work to raise awareness and save lives.
Okay, so Tyler, talk about Tyler. He took his life. And you obviously you're a suicide loss survivor trying to navigate that, trying to give back so no other family goes through this, very much like Light After Loss. So talk about Tyler. You say you didn't know, and we touched, the last interview I did, we touched on that. Sometimes there are no signs. So talk about Tyler. What was he doing? Where was he at in life? And just talk about him.
Yeah, Tyler was 21 when he passed. Tyler was as Kym said, he's super happy, fun-loving kid. More of a B-type personality. His brothers are more A's. But he was a leader. He was a great student. He was a terrific athlete. Played football, baseball, and basketball growing up. Started to focus more on football. He was a quarterback for all his teams. He went to Notre Dame High School in Sherman Oaks in California, transferred to Upland when we moved back to Claremont, and he finished his high school career there. And he was sort of a highly decorated quarterback down in Southern California. And he had the opportunity to play in college. He ended up choosing Washington State University, went up to play for Coach Mike Leach up in Pullman in Washington. And that was a big change for him, of course, weather-wise and so forth. But the people were great. He loved the coaches. He loved his teammates. He was a backup his first 2 years and played in replacement of Luke Falk when Luke got hurt a couple times. Had some magical games. He was sort of dubbed the comeback kid after the Boise State game. You know, he came in with 10 minutes left in the game and down by 21 points and led them back to a triple overtime win. And that would have been September before he passed the following January. So he was a kid that had everything going for him. You know, we talk about Tyler a lot, and unlike your story and so many others, there's a slice of the pie where, you know, some of these, particularly the younger kids in you know, the 15 through 25, there's a slice of that group that you just don't get any symptoms or signs. They don't treat, they don't ask for help. Their behavior doesn't change. Now, in Tyler's case, he, in retrospect, there was some changes in behavior, you know, fewer texts, a little less information in the text, in the phone calls, but he was still Tyler. And, you know, looking back on it, we would do 100 things differently, but knowing what we know now is not very helpful back then. So, you know, Tyler, this would have been September. He played the rest of the season. And then we went to San Diego for his bowl game in December. He started actually in that bowl game, and they lost to Michigan State. We went to Cabo San Lucas for a family vacation, and he went back up to school, and 7 days later he took his life. So Tyler was more than a football player, more than a student athlete. He was an unbelievably loyal friend and brother and son, and just, you know, I love all my kids. Tyler, I liked all the time. He was super likable, easy to be around, and sort of the light of the room, you know, without being, he was funny and he was definitely funny, but he didn't sort of hog the spotlight. A lot of the stories we got about Tyler after he passed were, you know, professors and coaches where Tyler would show up and they would always expect a football player or an athlete to need something, or can you do me a favor? And he was always there to ask how they were doing and find out more about the people he was being taught by or coached by, which are, you know, one of millions of stories about Tyler. So so unfortunately, although he did have a roommate that went to treatment every 2 weeks, his mother passed from cancer when he was young, and he went to a therapist. Tyler drove him to the appointments, went and got food, and they'd sit in the car and eat pizza and talk about the appointment and go back home. So Tyler knew therapy was helpful to some people, but he could never ask for help. And, you know, we don't know. We're not therapists ourselves. We're not medically trained experts, but in our world, you just don't, at 21, you don't take your own life without asking for help unless something's sort of dramatically wrong. And so, you know, Tyler's legacy is he was the guy everybody wanted to be around, not because he was popular, but because he was so kind and helpful and sweet. And that's how we remember him. And that's what we miss most about him.
Yeah. What an amazing story and heartbreak. And one of the reasons, you know, I was looking, who do I want to bring in for keynote? So up to this point, I've always shared my story. And I think everybody in Stark County at this point knows my story. So I really want Light After Loss not just to be about me, but about survivors and their story, because not everybody's story is my story. And there is a piece, number one, being a football town. We are Pro Football Hall of Fame, like I said. And then I was the director of counseling services at the University of Mount Union. Huge D3 football school. You're nodding your head. You must know the Purple Raiders, baby.
Yeah.
So I was in charge of the mental health on that campus. I did the suicide prevention. I was a university and college suicide prevention specialist. Crisis is what I did every day. it was my life. And I loved it, getting students to accept that it's okay to ask for help. And I know, being on that college campus, how difficult that was, number one, but then also being an athletic school, how hard it was to engage the athletes in the mental health treatment. And then once, my professional life flipped upside down, and now my personal story, I've learned so much more. There's only so much you can learn in a book. And when you walk the journey and you realize, as a suicide prevention specialist, it was my job to say, suicide is the most preventable death. And these are the signs and symptoms. If everybody knows the signs and symptoms, we will have zero suicide. As a survivor, I don't even like the word zero suicide, because that, it is a reality that not everybody has these blinking red lights saying I'm at risk. And 90% of people will show signs. The other 10%, which are hundreds and thousands of people, you will never know. Because as humans, we wear a pretty good mask, and we just don't see it. And then when we do that, when we oversimplify suicide prevention as just signs and symptoms, then I think what I've learned is that perpetuates the guilt for those left behind. If this is so preventable and this is so easy, and zero suicide is something we can accomplish, then I clearly have missed the boat. And what did I do wrong? We already have those questions already, let alone to think, oh, well, I should have done the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, will keep you up all night, every night. So really changing that dialogue.
When we talk, when we go out to the schools and talk to the students and the coaches and tell Tyler's story, one of the things that we ask is, and you're talking about student athletes, so this well at the collegiate level, so the age group. So we ask, how many people have had a parking ticket? How many people have failed a class? How many people have broken up with a girlfriend? How many people, have gone hungry because they forgot to buy the, food before the store closed? 100% of the kids raise their hand. And if that's the sign, those are the signs we got. Was he? Yeah. Well, he lost a bowl game, so maybe that's a little higher up the ladder. But out of 1,000 points, you're talking about 100 that everybody goes through. So it gets really difficult for survivors, as you say, to look back and go, oh my goodness, I missed this particular or that particular sign. It only makes sense after he's gone or she's gone, and never beforehand, because any one of those things, and Kym and I both, we wouldn't call 911 and have him, put on hold to get help on any of those things. Yeah. Right. And now looking back on it, that's all we wish we could have done. And you just can't build enough of a case to say that that's the case. And meeting you and others in our same position, I hear the same version of that story in one way or another. And it's heartbreaking, of course. And that's tough on the survivors for sure.
It is, which is, once I put on a really good mask for about 18 months and stayed at Mount Union. They were amazing through everything. But it was tough to be the director of counseling services doing crisis work and grieving at the same time. It was just a boat that was sinking. So, for a long time, like, I'm okay, I've got this, I'm going to be good. And I put on the same mask. And then, eventually it got to a point where, like, okay, either, we're going to sink or swim, and we have to swim. I have 2 young girls. I have to take care of them first. I have to take care of myself, and we are sinking. So I have to abandon ship in order to kind of save us. So, I think we all put on that mask. And so now with Light After Loss, knowing all the things that I thought I knew, but I didn't know, because you don't know until you kind of walk in those shoes, and knowing that perpetuating the signs and symptoms and zero suicide, I tell survivors now, you don't know what you don't know. Like you said, speeding tickets and things that, are somewhat kind of normal everyday stuff, especially with college students. How am I supposed to know that in a couple months, that's going to be a sign that they're going to take their life. It's just not that easy. So I think we oversimplify suicide prevention. And so light after loss, when I do suicide prevention trainings now, it is both sides of the coin, because we can't just say everybody's going to have a sign or a symptom and we're going to be able to save everybody, because if that was the case, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking. So not oversimplifying it. Talk about Hilinski's Hope. Obviously, Tyler's death has led you to Hilinski's Hope. And what is Hilinski's Hope? What are you doing? Where are you going? Talk about that.
So the foundation we started actually soon after he passed. And the mission has like 3 parts to it. And 3 is a big number for us because that was Tyler's number at Washington State. But, we're trying to raise awareness because we think in doing that, more people will be aware of what you were just expressing. And we're also working very hard to eradicate the stigma. That's really why we think people don't speak up, or they're embarrassed, or they don't feel right about how they're feeling, but they just can't talk about it. So we think if that stigma isn't there, more people will speak up. And as Mark said, we're not mental health professionals. So we've partnered with some of the best around the country, great sports psychologists, and we're funding programs, mental health programs that support our student athletes.
Yeah, and I think if you back up before that, when Tyler passed and we talked about Hilinski's Hope and what we could do, we immediately wanted to save people, right? So that there's another Tyler out there. Mm-hmm. And so we went directly, and because Washington State was completely underfunded and outmanned, and one half of one FTE for 455 scholarship student athletes, they had no resources to speak of. And so we immediately wanted to provide that. That was our goal. And what we found, as Kym was describing, you can't really provide solutions until you really get the awareness piece and the stigma reduction piece well entrenched in your mission. And so we realize that you want to do surgery, but you don't even know what's wrong. So you have to step back and take x-rays and MRIs and sort of do that. And so that was a learning experience for us. And it was difficult because you don't see awareness and you don't see stigma reduction resulting in kids getting help they need necessarily. It's much bigger than that. So there's so many of us doing the same thing and really important work around awareness and stigma reduction that it felt like it was a step backwards, to be honest. But I think we've really settled into awareness, stigma reduction, and then bringing programs and speakers and evidence-based research programs to the schools to help the student athletes.
Yeah, because it really comes down to you have to get people talking about it. And that is harder than it seems. That if people don't want to talk about it, people just, no, I want to talk about this or talk about that. But if we're going to talk about mental health, and then if you want to add suicide on top of that, people scatter. It is a difficult topic. It's hard to get people talking about it. So base level stigma reduction, just starting the dialogue. And then once the dialogue is going, then kind of the rest follows. So that makes complete sense, starting at the ground, getting people talking about it, recognizing the problem, and then building from there. What kind of programs have you been able to do at some of the places, the universities or colleges you've been, as far as stigma reduction or mental health screenings? What are you guys doing?
So we started, there's really 2 or 3 facets to this. One is we partnered with a guy by the name of Ross Szabo. Ross wrote the book Behind Happy Faces. He's done a terrific TED Talk, and he's been speaking for 20 years. He's a bipolar man who has a great ability to connect to his audiences, tell his story transparently. And he has one thing that we really like about his program is and you think about student athletes, we didn't really say this about Hilinski's Hope. We had focused on student athletes simply because it's what we know. it's not to exclude anybody, that everybody needs this help, but this is where we're at. So Ross does a great job in talking to those kids about the differences between being depressed clinically and being sad, and being anxious for a date or a test or a game, and having clinical anxiety that needs treatment, counseling, medication, or other. And he doesn't do it in a preachy way. He's lived it, and he tells his story, and so he can give very good examples. And what's hard for us is he's not hard for us. The difference between our story and his is he's here to tell it. We have to sort of tell Tyler's story without him, and it's crushing. So anyway, so that we do that. The other piece, and there's a lot of data around, there's a lot of data around this subject anyway, but some of the data that stuck out to me, was they polled kids in the same age group after they lost a teammate or roommate and said, did you notice anything different about their behavior? A high percentage said yes. Did you do anything after you found that out? A higher percentage said no. And the reason was they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to do it, and they were afraid that they would alienate the person they cared about. So a second program that's an NCAA approved program for 10 years is called Step Up, and it's a bystander awareness program. And it trains the student athletes that see first how to recognize some of those signs and symptoms, but then how to talk to the people they care about, and make sure that person's in a safe place and gets the help they need. So Behind Happy Faces and Step Up are two of the big programs that we bring to campus when we go out there. But there's a couple other things we'd love to share with you guys. United, Kym's done an unbelievable job of getting up this terrific podcast hosted by Dr. Josie Nicholson at Ole Miss, and some of the neatest people on the planet like yourself that are in this space, that deal with us on a daily basis, that have their own caseloads, and that can talk about this in a really educational way. So United's been unbelievably helpful and successful. And we just announced really on Tyler's birthday on May 26th.
I saw.
That we're going to do something called 3-Day. And 3-Day is really just in this year, in 2020, 10/3, October 3rd is a Saturday where most of the football games are played. And it's that week running up to 10/10, which is World Mental Health Day. So we're planning some activities. We've asked a number of our SEC partner schools to participate. Many of them have, many more are coming. It's not exclusive to the SEC or the East. It's nationally, and we're declaring that week Mental Health Awareness Week for college football. And we've partnered with some really incredible people. Quick story, the video that goes with all this was actually produced by a 17-year-old college football fan out of Toronto, Canada.
Yeah.
Just the neatest.
Out of the blue, he made this video, sent it to us, and ESPN got involved, and it just took off. And it's a way that we're continuing to work to honor Tyler and help build his legacy, but it's also a way to get people talking about their mental health, right? And if a kid who's watching TV, or a little kid who's in the stands with his parents and sees people stand up and hold up 3 fingers, that's, like you said, a way to start a dialogue, start talking about mental health with younger ones. And I think it's going to be very powerful when that week does happen.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to share the information when I put up the video. So I'm going to post the video on the last day of Mental Health Awareness Month, which is Sunday, but continue to post the information about, what's coming up in October. I think the nice thing is we do have a lot of awareness events and months and weeks and days, which we take advantage of. Like every opportunity we get, we're doing something about awareness. So I will make sure I share those as well. I'm kind of shifting gears. So for me, here I am, the Director of Counseling Services at the University of Mount Union, a well-known school in the area. I'm the president of NAMI Stark County, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I'm on the Suicide Prevention Coalition. I go around in Stark County and do suicide prevention trainings. People have questions about suicide prevention. They're calling me. And then all of a sudden, here I am, a suicide loss survivor. And I think the whole county kind of just took a step back. Like, what just happened? And kind of like what you said before, is that if it can happen to her and her family, it really just brought the reality of suicide to everybody's forefront. Like, how does this even happen? And so I felt, you know, in my small little town, you know, it's on the front page of the paper in November. It happened in August. It really just put me in the spotlight. I'm not necessarily a spotlight kind of girl, but it really just opened that door, the dialogue, wide open. For you guys, I would say even 100-fold. Like, you've been on ESPN. It was a big deal, which is probably why Hilinski's Hope and the foundation started so quickly, because it just threw you in the spotlight. So talk about that flip. All of a sudden, now you're a suicide loss survivor and you're on ESPN.
Well, what we try to do from the very beginning is be very transparent. Like you said, you're trying to do. We share our story, Tyler's story, our journey, in hopes that it will help people. And I'm not a showy sort of look at me kind of girl either. And so it did throw us in the spotlight. And it's not something we ever wanted, right? But we're here, and we're going to take our grief and turn it into something helpful. Positive seems like such a word that is not relevant, but use that grief to really help other people. It's nearly impossible every day to live without Tyler, right? It's a struggle every second, and I know you understand that. But we sort of had three choices. We could absolutely go off the grid, and we can't do that, right? We have Kelly and we have Ryan. We could just ignore what happened, but then we're perpetuating, you know, the awareness and the stigma part of it, or we could do what we're doing, and that's the path we chose. And everybody all grieves differently, right? And you know, we grieve differently each day. But this is somehow it's helping us. This grieving process with Hilinski's Hope is helping us take steps forward. And I want to say without Tyler, but honestly, I think he's here during every step that we take.
Well,
you know?
I think we're in a unique position because Tyler, you can Google how many Division I starting quarterbacks have died by suicide. There aren't any. While they're in school, we have an older child that played, quarterback Division I football, and that the divisions don't matter other than it's more constricted, right? So there's only 120 of them schools, and then you have Ryan, our youngest, who is going to be playing at South Carolina, and so I think the uniqueness of that was amplified by the fact that Tyler was also diagnosed post-mortem with CTE. So you talk about ESPN. The story was on all those shows because it's a sports story, a terrible, tragic sports story. The Hilinski Hope feature, that E60, if that's what you're referring to, that was a 9-month process, and that's as hard as it gets. We had the people that did it are amazing, unbelievably kind, extremely talented, but that's really hard. But we thought it was super important to tell that story while it's still, not too far, not too much time has passed. So I think it's just the circumstance and the timing of it that thrust us into that spotlight. We'd much rather be sitting here telling you what green beans he won't eat and what they're doing for the holiday, obviously, but this is the role we have, and as Kym said, we can either jump in and do something about it, or we can run from it.
Yeah. And I can completely relate to that because I tell you, I wanted to run and hide in a cave and
Yeah.
like never come out because that felt really good. But then, at the other end, as a mental health counselor, director of counseling services, fighting stigma and telling people you don't have to be embarrassed and you don't have to be ashamed and talk about mental health. For me not to talk about what just happened would be absolutely ridiculous. It would be just hypocrisy, and I can't do that. So I've always been an open book. I did take some time off to kind of step back and heal and make sure I was well enough. I did learn you cannot pour from an empty cup. So being able to make sure my cup was full enough so I can pour into my kids and then I can pour into other people. And that's been quite the journey. And even, it'll be 4 years for me in August, there are still really hard days, and knowing what I need to do on those days and knowing that, okay, this is going to pass. There was a time where I felt like it was going to be dark forever and ever. There was no light at the end of the tunnel and just trudging through. And then all of a sudden there's a blinking light, and being able to share that with others. And so you say, I always call it purpose, pain with a purpose. It's not positive. Certainly, I've questioned a million times why. Okay, I'm doing this work, and then it completely becomes my own story. I don't understand why. But now being able to bring that unique experience of, yep, I've been a suicide prevention specialist and I'm a suicide survivor, and bringing that unique perspective, it's one of those things where I've been given this. So I'm at a point where I have to do something with it. I can't just keep it to myself. I have to share it, very much like you guys do. What do you guys do? How far are you out? Are you in year 2 or year 3?
We are on January will be 3 years. So just a little over 2 years. And it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we haven't seen him, for a lifetime.
Yep. Yeah, time is elusive in grief because it does feel like it's that same day, and then it all at the same time 30 years ago. And I don't even know how that works, but I absolutely relate to that statement. So what do you do on the hard days?
Well, every day is hard. You and I had emailed earlier in the week, and we talked about the marked days, the holidays. Tyler's birthday was this past Tuesday. And honestly, Mark and I had a conversation, and it was working up. I worked myself up to his birthday, knowing that it was just going to be so hard. We cry, we cry. We actually share a lot of stories about him. We always look at pictures of him, and he's all over the house. I go on lots of walks. I had this rule before we moved out here, and it was soon after Tyler passed, that I was crying so much in front of our 2 other sons that I think it was taking a toll on them, because no one wants to see their mom cry, right? They want to protect them. So I would go outside and go on these long walks and cry. And I don't cry as much as I used to. And I don't know why that's a possibility, because the pain is still the same to me. But I think getting outside, we're near the water. We're looking out at a lake right now. Somehow water is calming.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, right. And, Mark does different things. During this pandemic and quarantine, he started playing his drums again. He's been a drummer his whole life. So I think that helps him. But what helps you, Mark?
Yeah, we're different. I mean, it's hard, the individual days, the birthdays and stuff, that was always important, and always important for Kym. So they're harder now, because they were so important. Every day is the same. I just, and not, there's things that we do differently on those days, of course, and it's those things can be difficult. But yeah, music and playing the drums and doing some kind of exercise is great. I mean, we we get hard days, we focus on the other two and try to do something important for them. And but like Kym said, it's pretty much every day still for us.
Yeah.
It is. And I think that's something I learned, because I think as a counselor, there's a grief cycle, and we know there's no timeline, but we expect that, with time heals all wounds. And man, after I was a survivor, I got so angry. I would just yell at people who would say that, because in Light After Loss really is about not just short term, but long term, because 4 years is hard. We have survivors who are 10 years out. It's hard. It's different, but it's still hard. And not, having that support 10 years out. And, when my girls graduate high school and they get married, it's going to be hard. I'm never not going to wake up and be a survivor and feel this pain and feel this loss. So how has there been anything that's surprising, knowing you're getting ready to head into year 3? Has there been anything surprising along the way?
In terms of our grief?
In terms of the grief. So for me, I was trying to get through year 1. If I can just get through all the firsts, year 2 will be better. Year 2 came and it ran me over like a steam engine. Year 2 was harder. And I've talked with a lot of other survivors, and it's harder. So it's almost, not everybody, but year 2 is almost harder. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. To me, that was when sort of reality just hit me in the face, right? He's not coming back. In the beginning, we're like, well, we can say that, he went on a mission somewhere, or, we'll see him later. I think what I keep putting in my head over and over again is, how am I going to get to 80 years old or 90 years old if I live that long without him? How are we going to go to our son's weddings, right? We're going to be grandparents, I'm sure. And Kelly and Ryan have told us that all their children are going to be named Tyler in some form, which
Right.
is adorable. But surprise, I think the only surprise for me is that I'm not crying every second like I did. And I don't know, I think that's our body trying to take care of itself. But that's the only surprising part to me. The pain is still there. I hear myself laugh sometimes. That's a surprise. And I almost don't recognize that laugh. But we tell ourselves all the time that Tata would want us to laugh, right? He would want us to smile. He would want his brothers to keep pushing forward and, be successful and happy. So we keep that in mind as we live each day.
How do you support each other? This is one of the topics. We do support groups, and almost every support group we have, we touch on this at least a little bit. It's been an entire topic, is that you're both survivors, but you're also individual people who have different personalities, who have different coping skills. So how, marriage is hard already, and then take something like this, and how do you support each other in your own journey, knowing that it is different? I'm going to go for a walk. You're going to go beat on drums. Whatever it is, it's different. So how does it not become like a point of contention where I can support you where you are, I can support you where you are, and we're okay?
I think it's come down to respect, right? And truly believing that we each are entitled to and have our own grieving process. And there are days where it's not easy, right? And maybe being apart just a little bit, helps. But I think it's just like the love we have for Tyler, right? Love is an unbelievable thing, right? And it's pushing us every day because we love Tyler so much and we love each other so much. And sometimes it may not look like that. but the fact that we're here, we're together, we love our other two boys, love and respect is I think what's keeping us going.
Yeah, I like the word respect, knowing that it is different. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's going to look different to everybody. So being able to respect that, I think a lot of the point of contention comes where somebody is farther along in their journey and the other person is not. They're really, I wouldn't say stuck, but they're struggling with something and the other person's trying to drag them along versus just letting them work through the process on their own. So I love the word respect. How have your relationships in general changed? That's another topic that's kind of common, is the people that I thought were going to be here have disappeared, and then people are crawling out of the woodwork to kind of help and support.
Yeah, I think same for us. I mean, the people that were there early aren't there as much, and new people fill their spots and stuff. But I think that's just the important thing to remember is those that started early are probably worn out. It's we try not to do that to friends and family, but it's hard. I can hear it in people's voices. Either they tiptoe around it or they ignore it altogether. And sometimes it's just easier not to have a conversation or a relationship that way. And then new people, I mean, Kym and I both have had, one or two people that have never wavered and always been there. And there's people that'll be there if you need them to be, but they're not always checking in. And so I think that changes. It doesn't, I don't really care either way. I care about about Kelly and Ryan and Kym. And as long as those guys are okay, then the rest of the stuff sort of works itself out. But the other part is, I think maybe I'm just getting tired of over analyzing it, for the purposes of communicating it, not that way, but just day to day. Oh my goodness, I haven't heard from so-and-so, or this person keeps calling, or what. It happens. Let them, whatever they need. We get a lot of calls for, and texts and emails and stuff from people that have suffered the same loss. And like just this morning had one of those, and it's usually somebody else calling for the people that suffer the loss. And the first thing I've been saying is they don't want to talk to us right now. Right. I understand. I totally get people wanting to help. Oh my God, the Hilinskis are doing this or that. We don't trust us. You know this. We don't have a magic pill or a saying or a phrase or a wristband that makes things better. It just is bad, period. So we'll be here and we'll talk to them, and most importantly, we'll listen to them, because that's what most people want, is to talk about the person they have lost. Yeah. So I think that realization or whatever has probably happened over the last 6 months or so. So that's a change, right? That's a little bit of a change. The people that matter will be there when you need them. They don't always have to be, checking in twice a day to make sure you're okay. And that's important. And we're good with that.
Yeah. And I think knowing that survivors really do, I think people want to fix it.
Yeah.
Even as a counselor, I really had to learn, and I did learn through my own journey, there are no words, there are no magic pills, and there are no interventions that are going to make this better. And it really is about showing up for people, just being there, and literally not saying a word. Just let them talk, let them share, let them do whatever they need to do, because it is their journey. There's nothing I'm going to say or do to make it better. So really, Light After Loss, really, we just love people where they are and walk with them in their journey. If they want lots of support, we'll give them lots of support. If they want to attend every single support group, they can attend every single support group. Or if they just want to know we're here and they're having a bad day, and so they reach out and we give them some support. We paid to get somebody's lawn mowed the other day, because very much like my situation, young kids trying to figure out, how do I do this by myself? And sometimes you just need your lawn mowed.
Yeah.
So being able to just walk with people, because there's nothing I'm going to say that's going to make it better. I'm going to walk the walk and talk the talk, and we're going to walk together. So I like that advice, that just listen. And when they're ready, they're ready. In the first few months, you're just trying to breathe and maybe get up and wash your hair.
Brush your teeth. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So do you think it's important for survivors to get counseling support? What's your best advice for a suicide loss survivor being a survivor?
Well, for me, it was, I think, talking about the person that's gone, I'm not in denial, not that they're coming back, but talking about them. One of the hardest things was remembering when I first thought that we'd have no new video or pictures of Tyler, right? The ones we have are the only ones we'll ever have. That was hard. But so the advice, and you probably feel the same way. We're not really qualified. Well, you're qualified technically, sorry.
Yeah, but really not. I mean, because there's no fix for this.
Right. So given that we're not anybody to take advice from, what's worked for us is, or for me, is to talk about Tyler and to share his story and talk to the boys about him. And if they need to talk, let's talk. If they don't want to hear about it, we don't do it. The second thing is, which we're doing with Hilinski's Hope a little bit and with our boys, is find some purpose that you probably didn't have before. Maybe it's your job, maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a passion that you have or something I think is important. The biggest one, which I'm not there for sure, but I think is forgiving yourself at some point, because regardless of the circumstances, I think there's always going to be guilt that you didn't stop it, you didn't fix it. As parents, especially, you think you should be able to fix everything. As a wife, as a mother, as a grandfather, you think, yeah, that's my job. I should have caught this. That's impossible. And so forgiving yourself is probably a longer piece of advice, but one you should start on early. Yeah. And as I said, not giving that advice because we've done it. We're not there, but I think you have to work at it.
Yeah, and probably our largest population in our support groups are parents who have lost children. It is, and I think that's just because we are in an area. So a year after Craig passed away, we had a suicide contagion and we lost 12 youth in our schools. So it was a crisis for all of us. And so we have a lot of those parents who walk with us and are in our support groups. And in the guilt is because, and I can't even imagine, even as a survivor, I can't even imagine that, because yeah, if it was one of my kids versus my husband, the guilt was bad enough. I'm supposed to be able to save them and fix everything for them. So my heart goes out to all of our survivors who have lost children, because I know that is a huge piece that they struggle with. So I think that's good advice as well. Has faith played a role in your kind of journey?
That is something we struggle with. We actually raised our kids Catholic. They went to mass twice a week, once, during the week with their class, and then with us on the weekend. And after Tyler passed, I remember just these conversations that I would have with God were me screaming at him, really, like, how could you take my beautiful son? How could you do that to me? How could you, or us, or him? And people would tell me that's okay. He can handle it. And I thought, but if he has grace, if he is supposed to be there for us, why did he take Tyler? So we struggle with faith. I have faith that I will see Tyler again, that, that January 16th, 2018, that's not a day that I use to remember Tyler. I know that's the day that he died, but I think I have faith that I will see the Tyler before his death, again in a way that I experienced him his whole life. As far as God and religion, and the role that plays in our journey, it's a struggle for us. And I'm being honest. And there's some people that, they need their faith to keep them going. And I think that's wonderful. We all need something to keep us going. But I think, just like what Mark said, as far as, forgiving yourself, I think getting back to religion, and finding that kind of faith again, it's a process for us. And I think we're going to get there. It's just so hard.
It is, which is why I really asked you, because it is been a part of my own journey, and being angry at God, packing up every single Bible. I joke and say I threw all my Bibles in the trash, because after that, they were kind of useless. Say that God forgot my address, my number. And actually the interview I did before this one was about the role of faith in recovery and suicide. So what I have found talking with survivors and my own journey is that we are very far from faith in God, because we feel like, if this is all true, why would this even happen?
Right.
And then at the same time, my own experience is that I felt very abandoned by the church. They say father to the fatherless and defend the widows. And I felt, okay, where is everybody then? Like, they didn't even know what to do with me. So I felt very abandoned. And so on the line of forgiveness, myself, the church, God, like all of those things. And it is a part of the journey. 6 months ago, I was in a different place than I was. Right after, I was probably an atheist. I was like, there's no way. Everything I ever believed, there's no way this would happen. So then that's why I ask survivors, is because the spiritual piece is a part of the healing recovery. Wherever you end up on the other end, it's still a piece. You got to work through that, and you got to, muddle through some of that stuff.
So true. We're sort of in the same place too. And I know parents who have lost, sadly, their children, and one of the spouses dives into religion and goes to, church a few times a week, and that, the spouse in that marriage, the other spouse, doesn't want to have anything to do with the church. I think it's been good for us that we are on that same path right now, because I don't know how we would deal with it if we had two separate views.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a reason we don't say committed suicide, because there are instances, and I think it's appropriate in some cases in our experience, and for 21-year-old kids, as you said at the very beginning, it's the most preventable death. You would never say you committed cancer, or that you committed a brain aneurysm. And so there's a reason for it. It was illegal to die by suicide however many years ago. You could be theoretically arrested if you didn't complete suicide. I think that trying to, in our talks and what we're doing in awareness, is to try to level the playing field a little bit in the discussion and the words we choose, simply not because we're right or everybody's wrong, but it's the way you think about it. And I think that analogy, there are some that do on purpose, intentionally, in a healthy mind, choose to leave. And that's absolutely a choice. I haven't seen that in any example for a 21-year-old. And so whether their brain breaks down, or CTE played a role, or they were depressed or bipolar or anxious to a degree that they couldn't take it, that isn't something they chose. And so their leaving also isn't necessarily a choice. I don't have the last word on this for anybody else. For us, that's how we think. And so I think it's important to kind of remember that. For Kym and I both agree on the same thing there. And it's difficult. We were mad at Tyler too, right? Because like all of us, we we bought into the stigma to a certain degree, and you don't even realize it. You know, we went up and talked to his teammates, and the first thing, I think one of the first things I said to them was, don't be mad at him. You know, he didn't leave you on purpose. He wasn't weak. And I was defending him, and I couldn't, and it wasn't until a little bit later where I figured out, what were you doing? Why is that so important? Well, you know, it's in this, unfortunately, suicide's in the news every day. There are parents and spouses that don't want you to know their significant other in their life died by suicide, because not even, who knows why, but they're embarrassed, or they think it's some sort of lesser thing, like it's noble to die from cancer. Like it's a sickness and an illness, and that's why we're focusing on the things that we think can improve your chances to not die by suicide. I think that's incredibly important because it's, as you said, preventable. I'll leave you with this thought, though, and Ross and I have talked about this, Kym and I have talked, there should be, and we can't find it yet, so we may be part of it. I do think there's a thought out there that suicide is its own disease. In other words, you can die because you're so depressed and you can't control your actions. And along that spectrum, you know it better than me. But I also wonder if suicide in and of itself is a disease in and of itself with tragic consequences. And I think Ross said at one point, I don't know, I want to believe we can save everybody, and you have to try, right? There's no way you can't try, because you don't know who those are that you can help. And so we do that. But I worry about that a little bit, and I think there should be more research into that. I think it's incredibly difficult, but something that we're thinking about.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree. Even as a clinician who is trained otherwise, you know, probably some of my peers and professional friends, you know, would just be angry at the fact that I don't even use or like the words zero suicide, because I believe that, you know, suicide has happened since the beginning of time. And yes, you know, for me, I use lost his battle with bipolar or mental illness, because to me, that is exactly what happened with Craig. But that's not everybody's story. You know, as a professional, I use the words died by suicide or completed suicide because that's what I'm supposed to do. But when it comes to survivors, I don't ever tell a survivor what word to use, because you use whatever word you need to have peace. And I do. Most don't like the word committed because it has that, it's a bad, I committed adultery, committed a sin. They don't like to use it. But then I have a handful who want to use the word committed because they feel like this person made a choice and I'm living with the consequences. And that's just where they are in their journey. So as survivors, you use what, I'm not going to correct you. That is not my job. This is your journey, not mine. So use whatever you need to. And I'm excited. You know, the research that suicide is its own thing, that you know, we know a lot, but there's a whole lot we don't know, and it's complicated. You can know, I'm the perfect example that you can know everything there is about saving people and lose the person who was sleeping next to you. Yeah. So you know, there's a piece there where we have to say it is complicated. It is not just signs and symptoms and going to the crisis center and being on medication. It's complicated.
That's right.
So Hilinski's Hope. Talk about Hilinski's Hope. If, you know, I have a lot of college contacts. If they contact me or they want to contact you, like, how do they get involved in what you're doing on college campuses and with student athletes? Because I feel like every college campus needs to jump on board.
Yeah. Well, we have a website. It's hilinskishope.org, or they can email us at info@hilinskishope.org. I think I've lost track. We've probably been visited close to 50 schools or sent our mental health professionals there. They can also listen to our United podcasts that are on iTunes or Spotify, and then maybe send us ideas on what they would like our mental health professionals to discuss. if they want us to come and visit, there's a place on our website that they can ask us to come and tell our story or send our mental health professionals there. They can get involved with 3-day. I think that would be, really important. There's a couple days left in the month of May, but they can jump on board and do the 3 burpee challenge it was launched last year. We relaunched it at the beginning of May this year. And it's basically to get up for those who are down. You do 3 burpees, or you tell people, if you can't do a burpee, why mental health matters and why it's so important to you. And then you challenge 3 more people to do the same. And that's a way of helping raise awareness. Just reach out, and let us know what we can do to help.
We're a small group. You don't have to be a Division I football powerhouse to talk to Hilinski's Hope. We've been to we've been to grade schools, we've been to high schools, we've been to junior colleges, we've been to Divisions I, II, and III NAIA schools. So that has nothing to do with it. It's people are people, and we want to help where we can. There is a logistical problem getting to multiple places across the country. And so we ask for everybody's patience in that, but you'll never hear us say, well, North Idaho is not really, important enough. Everybody's important. So we do our best to prioritize that. Obviously COVID's got us grounded for now. So hence the United podcast that we'll continue to do. And 3-day is right. So if you have alum or student athletes or friends of the colleges that want to participate, it's simple. It's really easy. It costs nothing. We can get stickers for the helmets. Everybody can put up 3 in the third quarter. And what's so cool about that is many of the most powerful things, the 3 in the third, raising 3 fingers before we start the first offensive play, that was thought of by a cheerleader and a fan having a conversation. They brought it to us. We didn't come up with it. And it's free. Everybody almost can do it. It takes 10 seconds. And all it does is it just gives support for everybody in the stadium. It honors Tyler because we're pushing in at 3 and all that. But the idea is everybody is okay with it. Right. We're okay telling you that we understand this and we're here for you. And that in a stadium, a particularly big stadium, but it is really powerful. And so it doesn't have to be these incredibly difficult, hard to watch speakers, and ours aren't like that either, but sometimes it's the simplest things that can really improve awareness and stigma reduction. So we're happy to be doing that. And we're thankful for all the support we've been given over the last 2 years or so.
Yeah, everybody likes the words free and easy.
Yeah.
Because, we're all busy, and especially now, money is tight. Are all of your programs free for universities and colleges?
Most of them are. There is a relationship with different schools, and they've been great. They want to help out with travel or certain expenses and stuff. We do pay our speakers, and to the extent that schools can help us offset that, we welcome it. But we never turn anybody down for that, and we don't have a fee for Kym and I come out and talk about Tyler, for about 45 minutes to an hour, and we will get there, stay there, talk about him, and leave for free. So we continue to do that, and it's a blessing really to talk about him to a bunch of other people, and get to share what an amazing kid he was in a way that's sort of helpful to those listening. So yeah, it's not, it takes money to run anything, as you well know. Right. There are certain things you've got to do, but we're really proud of the fact that we're a donation-based foundation at the moment, and we have some terrific friends in Pullman and here in South Carolina and everywhere across the country, Japan, Ireland, around the world that are supportive of Hilinski's Hope. So we take that responsibility very seriously.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic, which is why when I contacted you and I'm like, okay, this is a perfect fit, the college piece, the survivor piece, the football piece, and then I said, what is your speaking fee? And you're like, nothing. I'm like, what? So knowing, getting that dialogue going, getting people talking and sharing the story, people connect to the story. People may not remember what you did or said, they'll always remember how you made them feel, and people connect to the story. So I hope you will be back at some point. You're going to come speak for us at some point, but I would love to be able to coordinate something as well while you're here to connect with some of our local universities. I know obviously all the college counselors on those campuses, because they've watched me through my journey and support Light After Loss. You can get on some campuses while you're here too, to spread the word that, as a survivor of suicide loss, Light After Loss, appreciate your story. But, getting to college athletes and getting to just college kids in general is super, super important. They are in that big transition of life. It's a window of opportunity for mental illness. So it's an important population to reach. I appreciate you coming and talking and sharing all of this valuable information today.
Well, thank you for
Thanks
having
for having
us. It means a lot. Talking to you helps us too. So again, we're so grateful for you and everything that you're doing with Light After Loss.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you, Kym and Mark Hilinski, for joining me today. I appreciate them sharing their story of suicide loss. It is a club that you never want to be a part of, but then once you are here, the people that you meet and the connection that is made between loss survivors is something that is irreplaceable. You become friends, you become family, you walk with each other. So I appreciate what they do, their story, and all the amazing things they're doing for Hilinski's Hope on college campuses across the country. If you want to get in touch with them, you want to bring them to your college campus, or you just want to touch base and connect, hilinskishope.org. If you are a suicide loss survivor and you want to get in contact with Light After Loss, 330-846-3630. We will walk with you in your journey. We have online support groups, in-face support groups, morning mentors, events that you can connect with us. Just a way for suicide loss survivors to come together and not walk the journey alone and walk a journey towards healing. If you have a little light, give it. If you need a little light, take it. That way nobody will ever walk in darkness. Be well.